What's up, you guys? This is Michael with OffGrid Unlimited, and before we start today's video, the 1,000 subscriber giveaway video is going to be the next video up on our channel, so be looking forward to that. We promised you guys that, and it is coming. Christian just has a lot going on right now, but that's the next video coming up. But for today's video, what we're doing is how to cast a Baitcaster. So this is more of a beginner's video, but it's also a good video just to look up if you want some extra tips and tricks. So basically, you have a couple different types of reels that you can get, and as you get into fishing, you can do spin cast reels, you can do spinning reels, and then you can do Baitcasters. Now, before we start talking about how to cast these Baitcasters, we're going to talk about just the advantages and the potential disadvantages that you get with Baitcasters. Now, most of the time, Baitcasters are nothing but an advantage because once you learn and get past the learning curve of them, you'll probably almost never use anything else besides spinning a spinning reel for finesse fishing like worm fishing and stuff as far as bass fishing goes. Now, the advantages of having a Baitcaster is that, first of all, the line capacity on the Baitcaster is usually always higher. So for this particular reel, I think it's for 10-pound test line, monofilament test line, it's about 200 yards. And then, of course, you can start throwing braid on there to kind of get your diameter down to add more line. So one big advantage of a Baitcaster is that they hold more line. That's why a lot of your cat fishermen, they use Baitcasters because they're using bigger line. You know, they're using 30, 40, 50-pound test. So they have the ability to carry that when a spinning reel doesn't carry as much, and a spin cast definitely does not carry that much. So that's the first advantage. The second advantage of a Baitcaster is how smooth they are. They're usually geared a lot faster and a lot better than your other conventional reels, and also they're a lot easier to control. So when you start getting into fishing a little bit more seriously, when you're trying to get your bait to a certain spot in the water, like if you're trying to throw it underneath a tree, typically your Baitcasters are a lot easier and a lot more efficient to cast. And as you get to them, you can start getting into your pitches and your flips and stuff. And generally that's all done with Baitcasters. Now, as far as disadvantages of Baitcasters is pretty much just the learning curve that's with them. A lot of the big problem with Baitcasters is the backlash. So basically what a backlash is anytime the reel, I can't backlash it, but pretty much anytime the reel is spinning too fast and the bait hits the water too fast, or you let your finger too far off the spool, basically what happens is that whole entire spool just spins so fast that the line catches back up to it. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to teach y'all how to cast it and just give y'all some basics, and basically the two main tips that you want to keep in mind anytime you're casting a Baitcaster, because anytime you change a bait, you want to make sure that the Baitcaster is corrected again, almost dialed in. So the first thing is, if you zoom in on the reel, we got our spool tension over here, and then we got our magnetic brake over here. So the thing about spool tension is this controls how fast the spool is spinning, and this needs to be adjusted with the weight of the bait. So for example, we have a half-ounce spin bait here. It's not a big spin bait, and it's not a small spin bait. So what we want to do is we'll put our rod out right here, and we'll hit the button. And as you can see, it evenly falls, but when it hits the ground, you can see the spool right here. You can see how the spool is spinning too fast, and then it hit the line. This is starting to cause a backlash. So what we'll do is we'll go ahead and get this backlash out a little bit, and we'll go ahead and tighten our tension knob on the right side. Now, some Baitcasters might be a little bit different of where they're at, but they're generally always on the right side. So we'll tighten it up a little bit, and as you can see, it's too tight now to where the bait doesn't come down. But if I shake it a little bit, it still doesn't come down. So if you look back over here, what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna turn this counterclockwise. I'm gonna loosen it up, lefty loosey, righty tighty, and as I loosen it up, you can see how the bait starts to fall, right? What you want to do is, when this bait's falling, you want to make sure that when it hits the ground that the spool stops moving, but you also want to make sure that it's actually coming down on its own weight, which is why when you're pitching something really small like finesse worms, non-weighted finesse worms, that's why people use their spin reels, because dialing in a baitcaster to pitch something that small is a hassle, and that can cause backlash in itself. But right here, you can see we adjusted it, and you can see as it hit the ground, just a very tiny bit. So I'm just gonna make maybe one, maybe even just a half a click. And then I'm gonna try one more time. And you can see, barely, half click. You can see how it stopped moving completely. And now, we'll talk about casting. So generally I sidearm cast everything. It's a lot more accurate, and a lot of people don't think it is until you actually do it. Sidearm cast, and you see as the bait hits the water, look at my spool. And that's what we just mimicked on the ground over here. Spool's completely stopped. So we'll go ahead and reel this in real quick. That was a sidearm cast. Now one thing you want to avoid, the only thing as far as casting you want to avoid, is if you go overhand at all, it's fine. You know, you can go overhand, but what happens is generally when people go overhand, they want to do that. And what happens is the release point ends up somewhere about right here, about at this angle. And what happens is that almost just launches the bait down in the water. So I'm gonna do that just to mimic it, and I'm gonna try to stop the spool with my finger so I don't backlash. But they do something like that, and you can see I even had my finger on the reel the whole entire time, and that's getting ready to, that's starting to backlash right now. So if you go overhand, you want to make sure your release is somewhere, release right here, somewhere in this angle, right? So now I can almost pitch it over. Watch this spool, watch this spool. And it's good. But generally with the Baitcaster, you really don't want to go overhand that much. A lot of people don't understand that, which is fine. But sidearm casting, I always grab the butt of the reel, or I mean of the rod, and I kind of do this motion right here. And the release point, you have a lot bigger release point. You can release it, theoretically, you can release it right here. You can release it right here, and you can release it right here. One thing to keep in mind though is this is something you're gonna have to get out and practice. You know, that's something that you're gonna have to do, but it's easier to cast sidearm. It's gonna prevent you from a lot of your backlashes. And as far as casting a Baitcaster, that's almost pretty much it. The last thing is the magnetic brake on the side, and generally you don't have to mess with this. Just put it, it's always from 0 to 10. And if it doesn't have a 0 to 10, always put it in somewhere in the middle and then a little bit higher towards the 10. So I usually do about 5 or 6. And all that does is it just kind of acts like a secondary brake for the spool. But what we'll do is just one last thing is we'll turn it completely off, and we'll go ahead and cast. And you can see how the spool just backlashed when it hit the water, and I already have it adjusted in, so it's one of those things that if you throw it on about 5 or 6, it'll be good. Now if you put it on 10, it'll be too much. It'll have a negative effect that way too. So we'll go ahead and put it on 5 and 6 again. We'll go ahead and cast out, and as you can see, I didn't even put my finger on the spool and it just stopped automatically. So anytime you change bait, so if I'm working this spin bait all day long and I switch to a crankbait or I switch to a jig, I need to go back to square one, you know, set up my spool or set up my reel right here, click, let it hit the ground. Once it hits the ground, the spool should stop spinning, right? So that's pretty much it. One last thing is if you're going a little bit lighter, like if you want to pitch some rooster tails and they're a little bit lighter, loosen your tension up to a little bit more to where when it hits the ground, there's still a little bit coming out to where it's starting to go into a little bit of a backlash, and then just keep your thumb on the spool, right? But other than that, guys, this has just been it's almost like a little how-to video of how to cast a Baitcast reel. Once you start casting them, you won't want to cast anything else, and it takes a couple weeks learning curve. But if you follow those 2 tips, it's going to save you so much learning time that took me and me and Christopher a very long time to learn how to do efficiently, to where we was comfortable with one hand, just putting it anywhere we wanted to. But other than that, please rate, comment, and subscribe on the video. And please like the video too. Don't forget to like the video. That's always appreciative, and it makes us, you know, realize that we're giving y'all good content. So see you on the 1,000 subscriber giveaway coming up here very, very soon. And yeah, see you guys.